great. What could be better? A 4-hour Bob Dylan film. And so actually, what would be better? It'd be probably a 2-hour Bob Dylan film. Yeah, I think Bob as film director, don't give up the day job. I mean, it was just not a good film. It was not a good film. Great concert footage. Again, Rolling Thunder, top of his game. Some terrific stuff. The live concert footage was great. But oh dear, I mean, all this sort of tedious, you know, who's Bob Dylan? I'm Bob Dylan, and masked men, and oh, you know, just forget it. You know, it's just dreadful, dismal, you know, dismal experience.
Despite escalating financial problems, Dylan flew out to Japan in February to open the new world tour. A greatest hits show, it featured a large band more strictly organised than on the Rolling Thunder shows.
In '78, he made the decision that he was gonna do a big world tour anyway. He was going to take a big band on the road. Believe it or not, he was profoundly affected by seeing Neil Diamond in terms of how to actually present a show, how to pace it, and how to get people to actually respond to it. The style of show that he then embarked on in '78 didn't really suit him, and I think he came to realise that fairly quickly. But it was a very brave experiment, and it had great moments.
Stoner, too, was having difficulties with the big band setup. He was having significant problems with the background singers, and although he was the band leader, he was not able to fully exert his authority.
Well, I think that, that the background singers were the least musical of the sections in the band. And if we had insisted on arranging things the way a large band is usually arranged, namely with written arrangements, these were all head arrangements. And they involve people remembering their parts and executing them identically from performance to performance. The backing singers, 2 of them were very skilled at this, and one of them was not. The one who wasn't happened to be someone who Bob was very fond of, and I had to stay on her case a lot because she was messing up the sound from night to night. And of course, this created problems between Bob and myself. And so I was between a rock and a hard place with this. I mean, do I let this girl keep singing off key and messing up the sound of the entire band, or do I risk pissing off somebody who Bob is very tight with?
In the end, a parting of company was necessary.
It was sort of mutually decided that I would leave the tour. I became very unpopular amongst the other musicians because I was the band leader. So I was making all these decisions on Bob's behalf, and I would be the bearer of bad tidings to people. I had to stay on everybody's case about do this, don't do that. And the musicians came to resent me because they couldn't get an answer from Bob. They would have to get an answer from Bob through me. And I had to stay on everybody's case about their problems. And eventually it was decided that it would be better off if I left. And I wasn't too happy there either, so I left the employ of the Dylan organization at that time.
In May, Dylan rush recorded a new album with the big band arrangement, Street Legal. Released in June, for many it was a disappointment after the benchmark set by the previous 2 records. A work let down by Dylan's lack of care in the studio and his increasing willingness to compromise for commercial success.
He toured Japan, and the Japanese promoter actually faxed him a list of the songs that he expected Dylan to perform on the tour. And Dylan pretty much took it and did the songs that the Japanese wanted. Now, you know, there was a time when nobody told Bob Dylan what he was going to sing. In fact, quite the opposite. If you told Bob Dylan that you wanted him to sing The Times They Are A-Changing, then that was the one way to ensure that he wouldn't sing it. And yet here was the Japanese promoter dictating Dylan's set list to him. So I think there was something deeply unsatisfying to Dylan himself about what was going on with his touring at that time, and probably that spilled over onto Street Legal, because it's a record that has got the bones of a fine album and should have been a lot better than it was, but has to be deemed a failure.
In September, Dylan and his band began the American leg of the tour. Yet the warm reception they'd received across the globe was not to follow them home, and the concerts came under heavy critical fire.
In England, everybody remembers, and in Europe, and in Australia and Japan, everyone remembers those shows very fondly. I mean, the people were blown away by those shows. I mean, The Sun ran a full-page headline which ran "The greatest concert I've ever seen" as their review of Dylan's 78 Earls Court concert. You know, and a lot of the reviews were, I mean, they really were hyperbolic. So when he ended up in America at the end of the tour, he was, you know, taken aback to discover that the Americans hated it. The reviewers, I'm not talking about the audiences seemed to still be very enthusiastic about what he was doing. But the critics and the reviewers really did seem to, you know, have their teeth into Dylan. Ronaldo and Clara had been a big flop. Street Legal had not done well, and they all decided, as one it would appear, to give the uppity man from Hibbing a good kicking, metaphorically.
Yet on the second month of the American tour, Dylan experienced a seismic personal event, an epiphany that would transform him completely.
One night in November, you know, when his spirits were low, you know, he had a vision of King of Kings, Lord of Lords, and everything changed. He became literally born again, meaning, you know, he really became another man again. You know, but it was his most extreme reinvention.
This reinvention once more irreversibly altered the artist, and the hip, angry young folk rocker of the 60s and the ever-changing searcher of the 70s were replaced by a man certain for the first time that he really did know the absolute truth. A decade was closing, and Dylan was about to re-emerge as a very different singer and go through the most tumultuous period of his career to date. Where many viewed this transformation as a betrayal, others welcomed it as yet another metamorphosis in an ever-changing man and career.
Every time Bob has reinvented his music and his philosophy, he's enhanced his artistic stature and expanded it in a new direction. I mean, the guy never ceases to amaze me how he keeps reinventing himself. Always challenging himself, coming up with something new.
In 1965, Bob Dylan divided the world into the hip and the unhip. And in 1979, he divided the world into the saved and the damned. That's it. That's the only difference.
In this difficult decade of his career, Dylan had fought the barrage of abuse levelled at his country persona and emerged once more as a vital and unique artist, able to survive the 60s to present a new vision in a new decade. The future, however, would continue to be an uphill battle.